Hey everyone, what's going on? I just want to share some of the information and some of these horse synchronicities that I still keep having. And I've previously talked about how they're related to Russia invading Ukraine, and it's synced up to Donald Trump in this big boxing narrative. And it's really interesting when you think about this boxing narrative because this year is the Tiger Year, the Chinese Tiger Year, and Sylvester Stallone, known for being Rocky, right, in the boxing film, he's going to turn 76 years old this year on the date 7-6. And the word tiger in gematria equals 76. Been a big year I've been following with the film Rocky. Even Eye of the Tiger equals 76. And think about how that's the theme song, right? From Rocky 3 and so on. And I'll come back and explain a little bit more about this and how it's related to the horse theme. But think about Rocky, who fights the Russian, right? That's a big thing with Rocky films. He also had Conor McGregor, who's really important to this. And Conor McGregor also, a big thing in his career was the whole drama with Khabib, the Russian. And that was at the whole drama with that was at UFC 223. And this is a humongous number that we followed with Conor McGregor over the years. Remember his first big loss was to Nate Diaz, and he actually wasn't originally supposed to fight Nate Diaz, but whoever he was supposed to fight, they ended up dropping out on the date 223. And then he fought Nate Diaz, and then they had a rematch. And they originally scheduled that rematch for like 223 days later. And then after Conor McGregor beat Nate Diaz, his next fight was like 2 months and 23 days later. And Conor in gematria equals 223. And then the big drama with the Russian, right, was at UFC 223. And that UFC 223 was also 223 days after Conor McGregor had lost to Floyd Mayweather in the boxing match. And at that boxing match, Floyd Mayweather actually surpassed Rocky Marciano for like the best record, right? Floyd Mayweather became, I think, 50-0, and Rocky Marciano was 49-0. So there's this big narrative, and 223 is important because that just so happens to be the day that Russia invaded Ukraine. But as I said, I will come back to this because there's a big narrative with how it's linked up to the Statue of Liberty in France. So let me just go back. I'm going to kind of start over and hopefully explain this in a concrete way. But if you were following some of the recent videos that I put out, I had talked about all of this horse synchronicity I had, and I thought Wendy Williams might be important because Wendy Williams, I have a song where I say Wendy Williams looks like a horse, and there was these things that led me to think this. And of course, the very next day, Wendy Williams was in the news, and they were announcing that they were actually going to cancel her show, wherever that is. But yeah, they announced that the Wendy Williams show was going to be ending the very next day. And I was like, what are the odds? They're canceling the Wendy Williams show right after I say that I think Wendy Williams is important. And, for years, I've talked about Wendy Williams and how she was dressed as the Statue of Liberty back in November of 2017. And when she was dressed up, she collapsed on stage, and it was linked up to this Stand By Me narrative and a bunch of other stuff. But she was dressed like the Statue of Liberty. And in 2015, on Bastille Day in France, we had that Nice, France van attack, if you remember. And they said Sylvester Stallone was there, and the media gave us this story with him. Kind of looks like the Statue of Liberty. So I was like, there must be something to the Statue of Liberty and how it's synced up to this. And then the very next day, after Bastille Day, the big story in the news was that there was a coup attempt in Turkey. They were trying to overthrow the president of Turkey. And then in 2015, on Thanksgiving, or right around the time of Thanksgiving, we had Russia shoot down a plane from Turkey. It was a Turkey plane. Think about Turkey and Russia, or Turkey and Thanksgiving, and so on. And then, of course, you got the Rocky films that are all about Thanksgiving. Rocky's first The very first movie begins on November 25th, 1975. I think it's the day before Thanksgiving. And then Rocky doesn't defeat Apollo Creed until part 2, but he defeats him on Thanksgiving Day. And the film Creed comes out around the time of Thanksgiving. There's a whole bunch of Thanksgiving narratives that are all linked up to the Rocky films. And I should point out, too, Apollo Creed, when he dies on August 31st, 1985 in the film. And that just so happens to be Rocky Marciano's, the same day that Rocky Marciano died in history. And it's also the day that Princess Diana died in France, right? Princess Diana linked up to this as well. There's something important to that. But what I thought was interesting was this was on Bastille Day in France. And when I looked up the Wendy Williams show, it actually began on Bastille Day in like 2008 or 10, one of the years. But it was Bastille Day. And then last year on Bastille Day, the United States got this smaller version of the Statue of Liberty, and they called it the Little Sister, and they dedicated it on Bastille Day. So I knew there was something important to France, right? And Conor McGregor, his birthday just so happens to be Bastille Day. Look at Conor McGregor here. July 14th, that is Bastille Day. And, he just fought Dustin Poirier, the guy with the French last name, and this year is all about the number 229 in France, right? France, right now, on September 22nd of 2021, France began its 229th anniversary of the Republic, right? On 22/9, and it's in its 229th year right now. And Emmanuel Macron, the president, his birthday is 2 months and 29 days after September 22nd. And in the Francis Bacon gematria, if you write out France equals 229. And think about how Conor McGregor ended up fighting the Russian at UFC 229, right? UFC 229. That was when Conor McGregor lost to the Russian. And, we thought he was going to become 22-3. He ended up becoming 21-4 with the loss. But, it's just interesting how we were following that stuff, and then he had all the drama with this guy at UFC 223. But there's a whole other narrative with Kobe Bryant, and that's why he became 21-4. And that's why just before Kobe Bryant died, Conor McGregor won over Donald Cerrone, and I believe Donald Cerrone also equals 223 in gematria. Let me look it up really quick. It might be the Francis Bacon, but yeah, Donald Cerrone, 223. And this was like just before Kobe Bryant died in 2020. And then right after Kobe Bryant died, Floyd Mayweather's uncle died, and his nickname was Black Mamba. Just like how Kobe Bryant's nickname was Black Mamba. And Kobe Bryant in the Francis Bacon gematrias, he equals 224. Just pointed out really quick here. But Kobe Bryant and these Francis Bacon ciphers where capital letters are important, equals 224. And that's why they had his memorial on the date 224, because his daughter wore number 2 and he wore number 24. And, a whole bunch of other things. Michael Jordan equals 224. And they came out with that documentary called The Last Dance 2 months and 24 days after Kobe Bryant died. And that also had the flu game with Michael Jordan and so on against the Utah Jazz that Michael Jordan at one time retired after playing. Notice Utah Jazz equals 224. And Kobe finished his career against the Utah Jazz. And the first player to get coronavirus was from the Utah Jazz. And there's a number of other things with Kobe Bryant and 224. Such as, how he got his 81-point game against the Toronto Raptors, and Toronto Raptors equal 224. And the Toronto Raptors won the NBA Finals just before Kobe Bryant died. But I'm just bringing all this up because Conor McGregor became 22-4 just before Kobe Bryant died. And then we got all that stuff about Floyd Mayweather. And Floyd Mayweather equals 224, and his birthday's 224, and a whole bunch of other stuff, It's all interrelated here. But if you go back to UFC 264, right? We just had UFC 264, where Conor McGregor fought Dustin Poirier again, and his name is Dustin Glenn Poirier. However, I think I'm saying it right anyway, but Dustin Glenn. And notice his name equals 229, right? Just like this big number with France. And his nickname is the Diamond. The Diamond equals 229. I think Conor McGregor even equals 229, right? 229. Conor McGregor. So then Conor McGregor loses to him. And would you believe that if you go from that date, July 10th, to the day that Russia invaded Ukraine, it's a span of 229 days? Even more interesting is if you go from the very first day that Rocky, the movie Rocky opens up, 11/25/1975, and you go to this day, it just so happens to be 2 months and 29 days. 229. Also think about how 1975 was 46 years ago. It'll be 47 at the end of this year. And think about how Joe Biden is the 46th president, and his birthday also right around the time of Thanksgiving. There's a bunch of other interesting connections too to this date, because if you go from like Vladimir Putin's, or from that when Russia invaded Ukraine to Vladimir Putin's birthday, it's even 7 months and 14 days, a lot like how Bastille Day is on 7/14, which is Conor McGregor's birthday. And also if you go from McGregor's birthday to that day, it's 224 days, just like how 224 is the day in Russia that they invaded Ukraine. And think about all the other stuff with Conor McGregor in 223 and 224. Just think about this invasion on 223 in America and on 224 in Russia and so on. So there's an interesting parallel between these numbers. Even if you go from Conor McGregor's birthday to Vladimir Putin's birthday, it's also 2 months and 23 days, or a span of 2 months and 24 days. And, there's a few other things, such as if you go from 223 to Putin's birthday, it's also 226 days. And think about Conor McGregor's record right now of 22-6. And he got that record after fighting Dustin Poirier, or however the heck you say his name. But look at his name, 226. But anyway, the whole reason that I knew that Russia was linked up to this boxing narrative with this horse theme is because on February 23rd, it says 24th here, but that's when I blogged about it, but it was on February 23rd, I've been making all these videos about these horse synchronicities that I've had, right? And how they're linked up. And look, even Family Guy with Vladimir Putin and Peter Griffin riding on the horse. But on that day, I was making a video playlist to kind of make some of the recent videos make sense. So I figured I'd make a playlist and leave it in the description. And I noticed on the very beginning video where I talk about these horse synchronicities, it was from 2019, right around the time of the Kentucky Derby. But I noticed that when I put this video in there, I went to click the link and make the playlist or whatever, and Vladimir Putin just so happened to be on the screen. So the last time I watched this video, I must have stopped it right here, and it has Vladimir Putin on there. And I was like, huh, that's crazy. He must be synced up to this narrative. And I kind of went back and looked, and you can see here, I talked about the Kentucky Derby, and Omaha Beach was the horse that was favored to win the Kentucky Derby in 2019. And I talked about how its owner was named Richard Mandela. And there's this big narrative with the Mandela effect and Nelson Mandela and South Africa and how it's related to this horse narrative that I talked a whole lot about. But think about Omaha Beach and think about D-Day, right? Omaha Beach in relation to D-Day, that's also was in France. But anyway, after Omaha Beach got disqualified or scratched from the Kentucky Derby, the Kentucky Derby went on, and what was the horse named Maximum Security ended up winning, but he got disqualified, and then the horse Country House ended up winning. And on the day before that Kentucky Derby, there was a plane in Florida that skidded off the runway, and it was coming back from Guantanamo Bay, which is a maximum security place. And then Maximum Security got disqualified after winning the Kentucky Derby. And I knew there was something important to that. And I also got this strange message from somebody on one of my old videos from 2018 where I had synchronicity with Vladimir Putin and Family Guy just after Donald Trump had went and met Vladimir Putin. But the person wrote, "So when Putin arrives, what are you supposed to Google after Putin states that he did something on the plane?" And I was like, what does that have to do with anything in the video? It doesn't make any sense. And of course, the very next day on May 5th, 5/5, there was a story about 13 people dead in a Russian plane fire. And I was like, what are the odds this person would send me that strange message about Vladimir Putin in a plane, and then the very next day, we get this. And of course, that message was on 5/4, and then we got this on 5/5. And think about how 2/23 is the 54th day of the year, and how 2/24 is the 55th day of the year. 5/4. And anyway, the video that they commented on was this video. If I could find it here. Where did I put it? It was this video right here. I had made a blog post about it, but Donald Trump had just met Vladimir Putin on July 16th, or 16/7. And I came home and I was going to blog about it one day, or just kind of look into it and blog about what I found with it. And I looked up at the TV, and it was this episode where Peter Griffin is watching the film Rocky, a bootlegged version, and the Russian actually beats Rocky. And he gets mad, so he writes a letter to Vladimir Putin. And then later on, he eventually ends up having a boxing match with Vladimir Putin in the episode. But it was season 16, episode 7. And then, of course, if you go to the Wiki fandom page, the only picture they have of them is them riding horses. And I was like, man, I'm following this big old horse thing. And, you know, it's connected to this narrative because of that. And, you know, it was all by the numbers, like I said. Trump had met Putin on 16/7. This was season 16, episode 7. It was called PD4, that equals 39 in gematria, which is the 39th prime is 167. And, you know, just all kinds of stuff here linked up, right? You know, it was that meeting with Trump and Putin was in Helsinki, Finland, that equals 75. Russia equals 75. Pointed out the president of Finland, his name equals 75. Should also point out that Sylvester Stallone is currently 75 years old. And that Florida story was interesting. The plane skidding off the runway, and then we get the Russian plane fire. It was interesting because Vladimir Putin had also released this video where it showed nuclear bombs hitting Florida. And I can't remember what year that was. I don't know if that was in 2018 or 2017, but I think it was in 2018. So Putin had just made that video about Florida, and then we get these plane stories. One involves Florida. So I knew there was somehow connected to Vladimir Putin and boxing, right? And then, like 2 weeks later, on August 2nd, we got a mainstream media story with Donald Trump saying that the media wanted him to box with Putin. Like, what are the odds that Donald Trump, you know, would come out and say this? The media wants him to box Vladimir Putin. So, you know, I just kept an eye on this narrative. I knew there was something linked up to boxing and Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin and so on. And this is all in 2018. Then, like I said, in 2018, I got that weird comment about Putin on the plane. Then we got the Russian plane fire the very next day, and it's all linked up to this horse narrative that I've talked about. But later in 2015, we had this story about, or there was a big meme going around with Donald Trump's head like superimposed on the body of Rocky. And this got really popular right around the time of Thanksgiving. And of course, on the anniversary of the Paris attacks in 2015, right, 2015, this same year, Donald Trump met with the president of Turkey. And in 2015, the day after the Nice-Fran Van attack on Bastille Day, there was a Turkey coup that tried to overthrow this guy, right? And then you think about Enes Kanter, the basketball player who just got released, and he's all about, you know, talking crap to China and whatever. And that's why he said that they released him from the NBA and whatever else. But he is opposes this guy, right? He follows the Gula movement or whatever, the Fatula, I don't know how you pronounce it, but the guy who tried to overthrow this guy. But just think about that. That was the day after Sylvester Stallone was in Nice, France on Bastille Day. Then we get the Turkey coup. Then later in 2015, right around the time of Thanksgiving, Russia shut down one of Turkey's planes. Think about Turkey. Think about Thanksgiving. Then now we're getting in 2019, we got these memes with Donald Trump and his head on Sylvester Stallone or Rocky's head body. And notice I even talked about Conor McGregor and Rocky and Conor McGregor and the Russian, a whole bunch of stuff here. I even talked about that plane fire and so on. But recently, after I noticed that Vladimir Putin was on my horse video, I was looking through the stuff with Ukraine, and I was just, the mayor of Kyiv, Ukraine, I noticed, was this guy, Vitali Klitschko. And when I was reading about him, he actually is a famous boxer that became the mayor of Ukraine, or of Kyiv, Ukraine, right? And his birthday was July 19th, which is the same day that I had put out my video about about my synchronicity with Vladimir Putin and so on. The one that got that weird comment on it, that was the day that I put it out, was this guy's birthday. So I was like, I wonder if there's something important to this boxing narrative again. And, this guy was the mayor of Kyiv, Ukraine. And, of course, then we started getting these stories. We got a story like a couple days later about him and his brother and how they were famous boxers and they're going to fight for Ukraine, right? And also we recently had that story, too, of Mike Tyson, right? Mike Tyson had some words for Vladimir Putin. That was a headline story on CNN. And it's like, why is Mike Tyson? What does he even have to do with anything with Ukraine? Why are they using Mike Tyson? It's because they're doing some form of boxing narrative with how this is related. And I know this further because just the other day, I think it was yesterday or the day before, I think it was 2 days ago, we got this story about this other boxer who's joining Ukraine and his fight and so on, right? So, this guy, also boxing. So absolutely doing something synced up to this. And this mayor of Kyiv, his brother, when you look him up, it actually talks about how he lost a really big fight to Tyson Fury. Let me look it up really quick. So if you go to the Wikipedia, it talks about how his brother, the Vitali guy, he retired in 2013. The other guy successfully defended all these titles until he was defeated by Tyson Fury in 2015. And what's interesting is Tyson Fury was linked up to a bunch of stuff with Logan and Jake Paul and the date 2/23. And I need to go back and explain a few things of why I knew that Tyson Fury was linked up, but if you look up Logan and Jake Paul, one of them got in a fight. I think it was Jake Paul. He actually got in a fight on 2/23. There was a Tyson Fury fight on 2/22 of 2020, and Jake Paul got in a fight with this other guy named Zayn Malik at the hotel afterward on the date 2/23, right? And Tyson Fury was really important because recall later in the year 2020, we also got Mike Tyson, who fought Roy Jones Jr., and it was supposed to be on September 12th, and then they moved it to November 28th, right around the time of none other than Thanksgiving. So let's go back and look at the Mike Tyson-Roy Jones Jr. fight. Originally, they announced it on July 23rd, and they said it was going to be on September 12th. And when I was looking into it, I was like, that's interesting. That's 51 days later. And if you look up Roy Jones Jr. at the time, he was 51 years old. And his name in Gematria is 233, which is the 51st prime number. And I pointed out it was an exhibition fight, but Mike Tyson currently had 50 wins. So if he won, it would be like 51. And then I started looking into the 51st fights of each person. And I noticed that Roy Jones Jr., his 51st fight was against Antonio Tarver. And when I looked at Antonio Tarver, he was 51 years old at that time. And Mike Tyson's 51st fight, Mike Tyson also Well, Mike Tyson's 51st fight was at the Manchester Arena, right? Manchester Arena. And if you look up Roy Jones Jr.'s fight, his 51st fight was at the Mandalay Bay in Las Vegas. And I was like, that's pretty interesting because remember in 2017, we had the Manchester Arena attack at the Ariana Grande concert that was all about the number 22, which is interesting, thinking about this boxing narrative coming back up in the year 22. But we had the Manchester Arena attack, and then 132 days later, we had the Mandalay Bay attack, right? So Roy Jones Jr.'s 51st fight was at Mandalay Bay, and Mike Tyson's 51st fight was at the Manchester Arena. And Mike Tyson also turned 51 years old just after the Manchester concert attack, the Ariana Grande thing. So he was 51 years old when the Vegas attack happened. And think about Mike Tyson in relation to Las Vegas. And, Tupac at the Las Vegas and Mike Tyson fight. And Mike Tyson in the movie The Hangover. And he has the Tigers. And this is the Tiger year. So it's interesting they would choose Mike Tyson to, talk crap to Vladimir Putin in the news just before they, invade Ukraine and so on. But I pointed out how that Manchester Arena bombing was 132 days before the Mandalay Bay attack, and Mike Tyson and Roy Jones Jr.'s birthdays are 201 days apart. And these are numbers we see with the theme with the Catholic Church and so on, right? 201, the big Jesuit number. If you write out Catholic Church, it equals 132. Jason Aldean also equals 201. And if you go back to 2017, I was talking about the Jesuits like no other all year. Everything, I was pointing out all of these connections to the Jesuits. I thought there was going to be something really big that happened on the Jesuit anniversary. And nothing happened on that day, but I got a phone call from Las Vegas on that day. The only phone call I got. And then 3 days later, the guy who got the perfect showcase on The Price is Right, named Terry Neese, he reached out to me on my blog and said he needed to get a hold of me and all this stuff. And I messaged him and everything, emailed him, and then he never got back to me. But what's interesting is that when he was on The Price is Right, and The Price is Right was relating to the Jesuits. I don't want to go back and explain it, but when he was on there, he was wearing a shirt that said Las Vegas. And he just so happened to be from Henderson, Nevada, which is like right next to Las Vegas, right? And then the very next day, we got the Las Vegas attack, It's pretty odd. And when he reached out to me, it was like 134 days after his birthday, and his name equaled 134, and he wrote this 134-page book about his experience on The Price is Right and so on. And, I bought his book. It's actually sitting right in front of me. It's called Cause and Effects. And he talks a lot about, pretty much kind of synchronicity type things that went on with his perfect showcase bid and so on that show. But I don't know, there's also some very interesting things that go on with it. But, just what are the odds? He was from Las Vegas. He reaches out to me the day before the Las Vegas attack. And on the Jesuit anniversary, I get a phone call from Las Vegas, the only phone call I got all day. And just before the Houston flood, I got a phone call from Houston, the only phone call I got that day. Just before the Sutherland Springs church shooting near San Antonio, Texas. And I was talking about Kiefer Sutherland and how there was something important to him. Then we got the Sutherland Springs church shooting in 2017. I got a phone call from San Antonio, the only phone call I got that day. So it's pretty odd, I thought they were telemarketers, but it makes me wonder, And because when you answer, there's no one there and so on. But, once again, just pointing out this narrative, Mike Tyson and so on. And it was all linked up to these two things, Manchester Arena and Mandalay Bay. And then they ended up moving it to around the time of Thanksgiving. But also this, what was it? The Manchester Arena bombing was 4 months and 9 days before the Las Vegas attack, right? And that was interesting too, because Las Vegas equals 49 and Mike Tyson equals 49. And then they moved this fight to November 28th, which was 49 days before Roy Jones Jr.'s birthday. And his name in the Francis Bacon equals 227, which is the 49th prime number. And the fight was at the Staples Center, and Staples Center equals 49. So it was an interesting day that they moved it to, and it ended up being a draw, didn't it? I can't remember. I think it was like, I don't think either person won, right? But anyway, the reason that I thought it was important was I was like, there's got to be something. Didn't Jake Paul, hold on, I got to think about this, but Jake Paul, I believe, fought Nate Robinson that day, right? Jake Paul versus Nate Robinson. I'll just type that out really quick. Yeah, Jake Paul fought Nate Robinson at this Mike Tyson-Roy Jones Jr. fight. And so I was looking into Jake Paul, and I noticed that he got into that brawl with that Zayn Malik guy on 223 after the Tyson Fury fight. So I was like, there must be something important to Tyson Fury. You think about Tyson Fury, Mike Tyson. And when I looked up Tyson Fury, he just so happened to be born in Manchester. Don't know if it says it in here, but we'll find it really quick. I want to show you for sure. Yeah, look at that. He was born here, area of Manchester. So he was born in Manchester. He's even named after Mike Tyson. So I was like, there must be something connected to this, right? And that was on 223. And sorry, I'm thinking about this for a second because I just now realized his birthday is August 12th. And if you go back to 2015, a big day I was talking about where I thought World War III may possibly begin was on August 12th. August 12th. And that was a really big number. 128 was also really big with Philadelphia. It makes me think of Rocky. So August 12th, interestingly enough, is also the 224th day of the year. Like 224 or 223. His was an 88, the leap year, which was the 225th day. Which is still, it's linked up to the Mandela effect stuff, but it's interesting. The 224th day of the year. And it also, just trying to think here, August 12th. Thanksgiving, too. That was another reason why Thanksgiving is so important, because Thanksgiving, and I pointed this out for years, too, is that Thanksgiving equals 141, and also 167, like how all them syncs with the Family Guy and boxing and so on, and 183 like Vladimir Putin. So, interesting. But Thanksgiving, like, 141, and World War III is 141. Also 69, Vladimir Putin also equals 69. He's 69 years old right now. It's just pretty interesting how it links up. And it's also 156, right? 156 prime is 911. We're talking a lot about Tisha Bob this year. World War I came to an end 156 days. There was a Great American Eclipse in 1918, and it came to an end like 156 days after that Great American Eclipse. And, I'm just thinking about 2024, like 224, like how we got that other Great American Eclipse that's coming up. But I don't know, there's just something. Donald Trump met Kim Jong-un 156 days after Kim Jong-un's birthday, and he met him on the date June 12th, 612, and in Sumerian, World War equals 612. And I think even he met him in Singapore even, and I think Singapore equaled 612. But anyway, I'm just bringing all this narrative up because I recently had a whole bunch of synchronicities, and they're important to D-Day, which is interesting in regards to war. And they're also important to Logan Paul. I had synchronicity with Logan Paul when I went back and watched the Family Guy that came out on 5/5/2019, the day of that Russian plane fire. I went back and watched that episode, and I accidentally paused it, not paying attention to where I paused it because my kid started screaming or whatever, and I just paused it. And I was fixing something, or fixing what he wanted to watch, Sonic the Hedgehog or whatever. And I'll explain this in a second, but I'm just saying, like, I had synchronicity, and I paused it right when Logan Paul was on the screen. Like, came back like 10 minutes later, and I was like, you gotta be kidding me, Logan Paul? And I'm thinking about this boxing narrative and how it's related to Logan Paul. And Logan Paul, he fought Floyd Mayweather in 2021. And originally the fight was going to be on 2/20, but ended up being on 6/6, which is D-Day. We'll just look at that really quick, and then I'll come back and talk about some of these other synchronicities. I think this one will make sense if I talk about it now, but as I said, I looked up I watched like the PD4 episode again, and I had synchronicity with that other episode, season 17, episode 6, and recall right when I turned it on, there was a thing with horses or whatever. Where did I put that? I'll just go back really quick, but I figured I would watch some of the Family Guy episodes again to see if there was anything important to them. I hadn't even seen a few of them. This one I've never seen. But when I went to Hulu to watch Family Guy, and whoever was watching Family Guy at my house already, it was already loaded on season 17, episode 6. A lot like, 167, and I'm talking about PD4 that was season 16, episode 7. So I thought that was interesting, and I noticed it was already like mostly watched, so I clicked on the episode, and the first thing that was on there was this, horses. And I was like, you gotta be kidding me, horses. It's telling me to pay attention to this. And I also noticed that there was an episode that came out. Where did I put that now? There was an episode that came out on May 5th, 2019, the same day as that Russian plane fire, called Girl Interneted. So, whatever day this was, yesterday, I sat down to finally watch this. I didn't have to work or anything, and I got it on my phone, and I was sitting downstairs, and I started watching it, and then, not even very far into it, my son started screaming I don't know, whatever he's watching on TV, it turned off. He was watching some Sonic the Hedgehog thing. I don't know what it was. It turned off, and he wanted Sonic the Hedgehog on again. So I didn't really look at my phone or pay that much attention to it. I just paused it, and I got up or whatever. I'd use my phone as the remote or whatever, like on the Roku app or whatever. So I changed back to Sonic the Hedgehog, and then my daughter Claire wanted to show me something she was watching on her phone, and I don't know. It was probably 10 minutes later, and I finally got to go back to watch that episode. But when I got back, I was like, what in the world? I paused it right on Logan Paul. Like they were doing some joke about Logan Paul. I didn't even realize it, put it together, until I came back and I saw that Logan Paul was like loaded up on my phone. So I was like, what in the world? He's important to the boxing narrative. So obviously, I would have never noticed that, but it's like, what are the odds that I paused it at this exact spot? And it even says, 20 minutes and 22 seconds left or whatever, right? It was like the year 2022 even. It's like, that's unbelievable. But I just started looking into the gematria, and Sonic equals 222 in English Extended. And that's a big thing with the horse stuff. I'm going to skip over that. But the English Extended cipher is a cipher I've noticed whenever I have synchronicity with it, it is definitely very telling. Whenever I have synchronicity and it links up to the English Extended cipher, I know that what I'm talking about is on the right track. And Sonic also equals 75, and Logan Alexander Paul equals 75, and also 183, and Russia equals 75, and Vladimir Putin equals 183. So I was like, man, I didn't even realize he was linked up to Russia with gematria. And I went back and I re-looked up the Logan Paul versus Floyd Mayweather fight, because recall, Logan Paul, he fought Floyd Mayweather right after the Mike Tyson fight. And once again, think about Floyd Mayweather and how his birthday's 2/24 and his name equals 2/24 and how that's all linked up to Conor McGregor and so on. But when I looked up their fights or whatever, I noticed that they originally announced the fight on December 6th. And that's interesting because that is the day that Medina Spirit, the horse who won the Kentucky Derby last year and then died, it died on December 6th. And then they just recently nullified its win and so on, right? And that was the same day that Donald Trump had released his new website called Truth Social. We got that story about the nullified win of Medina Spirit. And that was all about the number 47 too. Remember, Ukraine equals 47 and Truth Social equals 47, and Donald Trump established that website on Kamala Harris's birthday, and she could potentially be the 47th president, and, you know, president equals 47, White House government, Republican, Democrat, they all equal 47, and this comes in the time of Ukraine that equals 47, and so on, right? All about 47 is also on the 52nd day of the year, and of course, you know, president also equals 52, government, White House also equals 52, Medina Spirit equals 239. Kentucky Derby equals 239. That's the 52nd prime is 239. So it's all just perfectly linked up. But I'm bringing this up because if you go from the day that Truth Social was established on Kamala Harris's birthday, it's also 47 days before Medina Spirit died, right? 47. And the date is 12/6. And if you write out Joe Biden, he equals 126. Afghanistan equals 126. Afghanistan also equals 223 in the Francis Bacon ciphers, right? Think about these two big things with Joe Biden's presidency right now. You know, Russia and Afghanistan were two really big things, and they both have a connection to that number 223. Biden born around the time of Thanksgiving. So I'm like, huh. And if you go from the day that Medina Spirit died, or the day they announced this fight, to when it actually took place, it was 183 days later. And if you go from that fight to the day that Medina Spirit died, is also 183 days later. Like how Vladimir Putin equals 183. Like how Logan Paul's full name equals 183. And that fight was originally supposed to take place on February 20th, which is important to a number of things. Vladimir Putin equals 220. And Donald John Trump equals 220. And Pope Francis's birthday is 2 months and 20 days after the Jesuit anniversary, and the Jesuits were established by the 220th Pope, or they were completely approved, and big number there. But the big thing that really stuck out to me was that they removed this to 6/6, which is D-Day, which D-Day is important to Omaha Beach, where the horse theme began, and Vladimir Putin was in that video where this horse theme began. Also, if you go from that day where Truth Social was established on Kamala Harris' birthday, it's 1 month and 16 days before Medina Spirit died. And that's interesting because Joe Biden equals 116 in the Francis Bacon ciphers. So then I went from October 20th to, so the day that Truth Social was established, and then the day that it was opened or whatever for people to use. And I noticed it was 124 days later. And that's very interesting because this is this big number with this Mandela effect theme and the Kentucky Derby stuff that I was following. Because in 2020, after the Kentucky Derby got moved to the date 9/5 because of coronavirus and all that. But during that summer, we got the death of Nelson Mandela's daughter named Zinzi Mandela. And she died 1 month and 24 days before the Kentucky Derby. And the favorite to win was 'Tis the Law that equals 124. And the jockey was Manny Franco that equaled 124. And I also was having synchronicity with India around that time, and India equals 124. Think about how Kamala Harris is part Indian. But the horse that ended up winning was the horse Authentic, and it won at 124 days after its foaled day, which I assume is his birthday, right? But notice when its birthday is, my internet will load here. It's going really, really slow, like always, but honestly, I don't think it's going to load, but its fold day was May 5th, 5/5, like the day I had that synchronicity, right? 124 days after its birthday. And what's even more interesting is if you write out Family Guy, it equals 47 and 124. And if you write out Simpsons, it equals 47 and 124. And the jockey for Medina Spirit was also the jockey who won on Authentic at the 2020 Kentucky Derby, John Velasquez. And his name equals 52. And think about how Truth Social came out on the 52nd day of the year, which is the same day they nullified the win of the Kentucky Derby. I also pointed out how D-Day is 124 days before Vladimir Putin's birthday. It's also 167 days before Biden's birthday. Thinking of my Family Guy sync, that weird comment. D-Day is also 229 days after Kamala's birthday. D-Day equals 126 like Joe Biden. D-Day is the 157th day of the year. Ukraine equals 157. Russia's also really, it makes sense too now that I think about it. Russia equals 173 and South Africa equals 173. And South Africa's, where Nelson Mandela was from, and it's all this big narrative that goes back to Nelson Mandela and horse theme, right? Omicron supposedly came out of South Africa. It equals 173. The FW de Klerk, the old whatever it was, he just recently died on 11/11. His name is 173. Even the first person in the United States supposedly get it in Minnesota or whatever. His name was equal to 173, and he got it at an anime convention that equaled 173, and a whole lot more. So it's interesting too, is that synchronicity was because of my son, Zamian, who wanted to watch Sonic, and his name equals the same as Logan Paul. But when Zamian was born, I actually made this, I had a bunch of synchronicity with Family Guy on the exact day that he was born. And it was the only thing I watched. We were at the hospital, and my son was born, and he was born at 1/24, and his actual due date was 1/24, like January 24th, but he was born on January 17th instead. But his due date was 1/24, and then he ended up being born at 1/24 in the afternoon. But my friend Cody had called me, and I went out to out in the hallway and talked to him for like an hour, and we even talked about gematria and a whole bunch of stuff. I hadn't seen him in a while, and he called me just to congratulate me. He was the only one of my friends who called me and congratulated me and so on. And what was interesting is that his name equals 72 in gematria, and my son, Zamian Barrett, equals 72 frontwards and in reverse. And I didn't notice that at the time, but after I talked to my friend Cody, I went back into our hospital room, and I was really tired. I'd been up for a long time, and I was going to try to lay down and go to bed, so I got a blanket or whatever, and I laid down on the little couch bed thing, and I was just going to watch TV and probably fall asleep. And I looked up at the TV, and the first thing I saw was an episode of Family Guy, and this girl having a baby, and they said, "It's a boy." And I'm like, what are the odds the first time I even look at the TV since we've been in the hospital is that some girl is like pushing out a baby boy? You know what I'm saying? And my girlfriend just had a baby boy. So when I looked up the episode, it was the 72nd episode of Family Guy, My kid's name equaled 72. Just got done talking to my friend whose name equals 72. I go in and the first thing I see is this, and it's the 72nd episode. And then the next night, I came back to the town I live in. We had to stay at the hospital again that next night. And I had synchronicity with season 7, episode 2 of Futurama even. But, moral of the story, I guess, is, well, you know what else is interesting is my other son, who we named Alistair, partially because of Alistair Crowley or Crowley, only because I'd been blogging about him, and then my girlfriend suggested we name him Alistair. And she had no idea about that. She just chose the name from something else. And I was like, whatever. Let's change the spelling or whatever and make it Alistair, right? Well, I knew he was going to be connected to Alistair Crowley because Alistair Crowley died at the age of 72. And think about the 72 demons of the Goetia. And the being that he conjured up was Awas, that equals 72. And the year that my son Alistair was born, it was just before the 72nd anniversary of Alistair Crowley dying at the age of 72. And I thought he would be born on 9/5, the day leaving 117 days in the year, only because my girlfriend's name equals 117, and then our son, Zamian, was born on January 17th, and our daughter Claire was born 117 days before my girlfriend's birthday. And I thought that would be an interesting day, but instead he was born on August 31st, which is 72 days before my birthday, and 93 days before the 72nd anniversary of Alistair Crowley dying. And think about Alistair Crowley, and the number 93 and Philema, and so on. It's like, what are the odds? But he was born exactly all by that number 72, But I'm bringing all of this up because in this Family Guy episode, right after this girl has a baby, the next thing that happens is they go to this clip with Sylvester Stallone and Tony Danza, right? Think about it. Sylvester Stallone and Rocky. And the year that my son Zamian was born, the year that I had that synchronicity with this, Sylvester Stallone turned 72 years old later that year, right? And if you... Zenith showed me how on the film Rocky, there's 72 steps. And Rocky also equals 72 in gematria. So I knew there was some type of relationship. And I even made this blog post about it because I had made that video, which coincidentally, I made that video on January 24th. I made a video about the birth of my son, and YouTube blocked it worldwide. They waited until March 8th, and they blocked it worldwide. And I don't understand why to this day, because they said that it was a copyright thing, but all I did was show my blog post. I showed like these pictures. That was it. And I mean, you can go to YouTube right now, and they got clips of Family Guy and all kinds of stuff you can watch. But yet, I showed this blog, and I showed some of these pictures, and that was it from Family Guy. And they completely blocked my video worldwide. But you know, just interesting. When I made that blog post and they blocked it worldwide, I talked about the Statue of Liberty, Sylvester Stallone, and so on. So it's interesting that Logan Paul sync would happen because of my son, Zamian. I guess that's the point that I'm getting at. You know, I talked about all this. And it makes me wonder in relation to, once again, earlier this year, when the whole horse stuff that I was talking about has a lot to do with the number 219. And I pointed out how Ukraine equals 219. And then, of course, we got all the Ukraine stuff, and there's all this horse synchronicity that I'm having, and had all kinds of stuff with 219 that was really linked up to what I'm talking about. But a big thing that I was talking about with Ukraine is, for years, since 2014, I believe it was, I was talking a lot about the planet Neptune, and Neptune is the god of horses. And that's why the Denver Broncos were in the Super Bowl against the Seahawks, because he's also the god of the sea. It was like the horse versus the Seahawk. And, you know, I pointed out how Rihanna was from Barbados, and Barbados, their flag is the trident that Neptune holds. And there was also stuff with Crimea and stuff like that going on. And then I pointed out how the coat of arms for Ukraine is also a trident. And there was also at that Super Bowl that weird Maserati commercial with the trident, and it said, "Now we strike," and so on. They did a bunch of stuff that was related to Neptune and the trident. But once again, Neptune is the god of horses. So I thought Neptune, since Ukraine equaled 219, that was probably something important to how Ukraine was linked up to that horse narrative. But a bunch of people were pointing out that Ukraine invaded, or I keep saying that, Russia invaded Ukraine 770 days after Russia shot down the Ukraine plane, right? Let's just type it out really quick. But on January 8th, 2020, Russia shot down a plane from Ukraine, right? And it was 777 days later. Think about Boeing 777 and so on. This is also Kim Jong-un's birthday, which is interesting, especially in regards to Donald Trump meeting Kim Jong-un and a whole lot more, you know. Donald Trump possibly being the 48th president. And this is also the day of Megxit, right? When Prince Harry and Meghan Markle had left the royal family and all that. So this is an interesting day here. But the reason I'm bringing that up is because when I made a blog post about that Ukraine airplane, let me just pull it up here. We have the Ukraine airplane. When I made a blog post about it, I talked about it in connection to the Malaysian airline that went missing in 2014, right after the Super Bowl, that was all about Neptune and horses and stuff. And once again, Ukraine has the coat of arms with the trident, but that plane that went missing from Malaysia also had a big trident on it. Let's just type it out really quick. Malaysia Flight 370. Well, See how it has the trident on it and so on? But look, it went missing on March 8th, right? That's the same day that I got that YouTube took down my video. So it just makes me wonder if there's some relationship to why that they took it down on March 8th, or if that's, it's interesting. I blogged about it on March 9th, and 219 was all about the number 39 as well. It was 3 months and 9 days after my 39th birthday, and a whole lot more. But I just know there's something important to how that's related to what I'm talking about with Rocky. And then we got the Rockies, really important, as I said in the beginning, to the year of the tiger. If you watch I Pet Goat, they got all the tanks out, and the skeleton, he touches the back of the girl wearing the tiger jacket, like right before war and stuff like that. And on top of that, Donald Trump's going to be 76 years old this year. And George W. Bush is going to turn 76 on the same day as Sylvester Stallone. He's going to be 76 years old. Skull and Bones equals 76. George Bush, all linked to Skull and Bones. Talked about that a million times, Which is interesting because their number's 322. The reflection of 223. It's also interesting in regards to Donald Trump and all of the, his website, Truth Social and so on. And if you go back and watch that video that I have, I talked all about how he's linked up to Cleveland, and the Super Bowl was linked up to Cleveland, and Donald Trump's national convention was held on Nelson Mandela's birthday in Cleveland, and Cleveland is important to Grover Cleveland, who was the president who served 2 non-consecutive terms. And what's interesting about the Statue of Liberty's narrative is that the Statue of Liberty actually was dedicated on October 28th, 1886, and it was dedicated when Grover Cleveland was the president. And it just so happened to be dedicated 224 days after his birthday. Once again, 223, 224. It's interesting narrative, And there's some other interesting things with Grover Cleveland too, but think about, once again, this connection to France, again, with the Statue of Liberty in France, and been following this big narrative with it forever. I don't know how, France is just, it links up like crazy. Even a Statue of Liberty with the S exception equals 72. Statue of Liberty. If you go the other way, if you go from the day the Statue of Liberty was dedicated to Bastille Day, it's 259 days, and that's also interesting because if you write out Statue of Liberty, it equals 259. Bastille Day, I think, equals 239. Yeah, but Bastille Day, 239, like Paris, France, right? Like how Pope Francis visited the White House in the 239th year of the United States, or he visited America, and he came on the anniversary of the French Republic. And then 52 days later, we got the Paris, France ISIS attack, and the word Pope equals 52. And, 52nd Pride was 239, and a whole lot more, These Francis Bacon ciphers, there's 52 letters in the cipher. Also equals these numbers associated with the Jesuits and so on, right? The Jesuits established in Paris, France. 218, this big number, important to 9/11. Adolf Hitler. Think about World War and so on. Adolf Hitler, 239. The Eiffel Tower. Eiffel Tower. Paris, France equals 56. Right? 218, so on. Eiffel Tower, I'm pretty sure equals 56. Eiffel Tower, 56. 123. These interesting numbers to what I'm talking about. But, it was created for the World's Fair that began on 5/6 and a whole lot more. But I think you get the point. I'm going to go back. I just want to share some of these other synchronicities that I had. And we'll just, see where this narrative keeps on going. But there's definitely something to how it links up to Family Guy, all these things, but let's go back. I just want to share some synchronicity, and then I'm going to end the video here, but there's so many things that happen all day, it's just hard to even keep up, but I don't remember what day some of these things happened on. That was an afternoon, so on February 24th, I was at work, and the bathroom's like right over here, so I had to pee or something. I went in the bathroom, and I came out, and there's all these newspapers here, and for whatever reason, I was just killing time. It was pretty slow, and for whatever reason, I just walked up to the Omaha World Herald. I skipped over these two. I walked up to the Omaha World Herald, and I looked at this picture, and I read the caption, and of course, it talked about this former high school football coach or whatever, or just coach, and how, well, the thing said that he's meeting his former athletes at the Hungry Horse in Erickson, right? This bar or something called the Hungry Horse. I'm like, what are the odds that I'm talking about all this horse synchronicity all the time, and then the first thing I look at work is this Omaha World Herald, and it's got a horse on it. And once again, the horse stuff goes back to Omaha Beach, right? And this is the Omaha World Herald. And this guy's at the Hungry Horse. And then I walked up front, and because the girl named Caitlin, who loves horses that I work with, and I've had synchronicity with her recently, I've been telling her about these horse syncs. And I went up and I said, look at this. This is the first thing I looked at. Tell me what you see on this. And I showed her, and she's like, you gotta be kidding me, horse? And I'm like, I know. And she's like, that's even funnier because Kayla, who is our boss, she came up to her, like, when I was in the bathroom and told her that she better put gas in her truck because gas is going to go up with the whole Russia thing and whatever, and she was going to change the gas in a few hours, and it was going to go up like 10 cents or something. And she's like, if you don't put gas in now, you're going to have to ride your horse to work, you know? And then I'm just like, that's just crazy that she would bring up something about a horse, and then I see this newspaper, and it's about the Hungry Horse, and I just searched this guy. He's an older guy, and I was like, he probably don't have a Facebook, but since he's a coach, he must. And I looked up the town, too, where he's the coach. Their mascot's the Bronco, like the horse, of all things. And I found this guy on Facebook, and his birthday just so happens to be 6/6, D-Day. And I'm like, well, once again, Omaha Beach, D-Day, it's all linked back to whatever, you know? No, I even noticed some interesting things like Peyton Manning, right? He always said Omaha, right? And he played for the Colts and the Broncos, both horses. And his name's 219, that number with the horses. And then John Elway is 224. And, you know, Aaron Rodgers possibly going to the Broncos and all that stuff. Operation Neptune, which is what D-Day was called. Think about Neptune and horses, and that equals 224. So I was just like, another thing with D-Day that's important. Then the next day I talked about all this boxing stuff. Just want to go through here really quick and look, but talked about, so I talked about all this boxing stuff and how it's linked up to Thanksgiving, and Thanksgiving's even 66, like how D-Day is on 6/6, and how D-Day equals 66, and you know, Mike Tyson's name 183 like Vladimir Putin at Thanksgiving too. But, you know, I talked about all this Thanksgiving stuff, and then that was in the morning on Friday, it was on Friday morning, and I walked downstairs I had a sandwich that I bought at Walmart the night before, like one of them deli sandwiches they have, and I was like, I'm going to go eat that and sit on the couch and talk to my girlfriend for a little bit, and I was sitting there talking to her, and she was watching The Simpsons apparently, and I just happened to look up at the TV, and it was an episode about Thanksgiving. And, you know, the more I looked at this episode, it was funny because there's even a part where Lisa makes this mural, and then Bart and her like fight over it or whatever. But she mentions how Marjorie Stoneman Douglas is on that mural. And then she also makes like a joke that nobody even knows who Marjorie Stoneman Douglas is. Which is funny because, you know, I never had no idea who that was until the Stoneman Douglas shooting, you know, but this episode equals 223 in gematria. Also, this episode came out, or Marjorie Stoneman Douglas that shooting was in 2018, and that was right after my son was born. And recall, you know, it was the Stoneman Douglas Eagles after the Eagles won Super Bowl 52. And I also talked about how that was all linked up to my sister with that drowning narrative, right? And how my sister's town had a Super Bowl commercial that year, and then a girl from her town died and drowned in Sioux Falls, and that's where I just went on vacation. Just watched my previous videos, but my grandma, I had been at my grandma's house right after the Falcons had lost the Super Bowl, and my grandma lived on Eagle Street, and I found out my Uncle Clancy was there and my sister was there, and I found out my sister owned a company called Eagle Acres and lived on Falcon Avenue, something I never knew before. I was like, that's interesting. And then my Uncle Clancy, his son, Ryan, is the only Eagles fan that I ever knew. And then later that year, my grandma, this was 2017, my grandma died. And then after this Eagles won the Super Bowl, my Uncle Clancy died. Just like his lung collapsed and he ended up dying. But, trying to think, I think his birthday was even 3/22, but I could be wrong. But the reason I'm bringing this up is like this eagle narrative. It just makes me think of the Russian, right? Khabib, the Russian UFC fighter, because his nickname's the Eagle, right? So I don't know if there's something important to that, but Marjorie Stoneman Douglas and, the Eagles and whatever else. But also, think about Lisa Simpson and Kamala Harris wearing the purple dress, just like Lisa Simpson with the pearl necklace, right? And then that Simpsons episode that's all linked up to Kamala Harris's birthday and a whole lot more where Lisa's the first woman president after Donald Trump. And Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, the day that happened, her death date was also 2 months and 19 days later. And it was on 2/25, which is interesting because the word horse in the Fibonacci sequence, or the Fibonacci cipher, equals 225, and Nelson Mandela's full name equals 225, and he died 225 days after his birthday, and the current president of South Africa, his name equals 225, so, just interesting with that horse narrative. But right after that episode, I was still sitting there, and I was looking into Marjorie Stoneman Douglas some more, like wondering why she might be important, and then I randomly looked up at the TV again, and the next episode was on. And the first thing I saw was this. It was like a boxing ring, right? Turned out to be wrestling, but it was still like, I was like, what are the odds? It looks like a boxing ring. And I know that it's important because right after this guy goes in the ring, and it's Bart the Daredevil, but the other guy, he comes out, his name is something the Friendly Russian, right? His challenger is Rasputin, the Friendly Russian. So there's a play on Rocky here in Russia and so on. It's just like, what are the odds that would be on TV? And I pointed out Bart the Daredevil equals 11/24, and that just reminded me of how Thanksgiving's going to be on 11/24 this year. And the rest of the episode, it's kind of like a Daredevil thing, and it reminds you of Evel Knievel. And I noticed he died in Florida, like Marjorie Stoneman Douglas was important to the Everglades and so on. And then I was thinking about the Russian nuke video in Florida. But Florida also equals 124, that number connected to the Simpsons. And there's a gambling episode where they say Freemasons run the country as well, that I've blogged about a whole lot. And because I had synchronicity with it even after going to the casino one night, but it's about how Marge has this gambling problem, but they do a joke about Florida on that episode too, so it just makes me wonder. And then I was looking through people who are from Clearwater, Florida, because that's where Evel Knievel died, and I saw this lady, this Melanie Sofka, and my band actually covers one of her songs, and I always thought she was a younger person. I had no idea who this person was until I saw this. I saw her name, but she's 75 years old, and she's also has Ukrainian descent. So I was like, maybe there's something important to that, So I just blogged about it, but let's see here. So I had that synchronicity. Then on Friday again, February 25th, it was later in the day, I think, is what it was. But I have to read. I can't even remember it all. So apparently after all these syncs or whatever, I had laid down and went back to sleep for like an hour or something, took a nap. And I was there. I was like, I don't remember what I was doing, but I was sitting there on my phone or whatever. And then my girlfriend's brother was over and he started talking to me about Ukraine and Russia and all that. And I started telling him about the horse theme in all my syncs because, I don't know. I feel like it resonates with people. Numbers get people frustrated, You can bring the numbers in after you start telling them some things. Because it just seems like some people just shut down. But I was telling him all about my horse syncs, and he was just like, man, that's crazy. And then he said, that's interesting because I've been watching the new Rick and Morty season, and there's this episode about this. Because I was telling him about Neptune and horses and whatever, and he said there's like this underground king that kind of reminds him of Neptune, and there's these horse people that are on one of the new episodes. And, I didn't think anything of it. But when I was talking to him about it, I looked up at the TV and Futurama was on, and there was this ghost, like a horse and a ghost or whatever. And I was like, look, there's a horse on TV as we're talking about the horse theme, And we both kind of laughed or whatever. And then he told me about this stuff with the Rick and Morty and whatever. And then he went and played PlayStation or Xbox with Jasmine's other brother who lives with us, and they were playing Xbox. And I got on Facebook, and I got on my phone, and I went to Facebook, and this was already loaded up. I didn't even move. I just opened up Facebook, and must have been where I stopped it before I talked to him, right? Rick and Morty. And I'm like, Facebook didn't even give me that ad because they heard what we were talking about. That's literally where I stopped it at. And I talked to him about the horse thing, and he brings up Rick and Morty. It's just craziness. And what's even funnier is right up here, the post right above it was a post by a girl I went to high school with, Amy, and her birthday is 2/22, and her brother is Phil. He's the one who loves horses, and the word Philip means lover of horses, and he got in the ATV accident and is paralyzed and so on. And I'm like, what are the odds? She would be the post right above that. And then my kid had my phone later in the day when I kind of realized that, and I was trying to get a screenshot of this because I don't know how to explain it, but like when I went back to this, my Facebook reloaded, so I couldn't get a picture. So I went to her actual page just to show that it is the same message that's like right above it to prove that it was this thing involving horses. But as I got my phone for my kid and I took a screenshot, and he was watching some YouTube video. And as I was getting ready to take the screenshot, there was a ad for the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, the new Brett Bel-Air show. And right as I'm taking the picture, he says, Uncle Phil, or whatever. And I'm like, dude, what do you gotta be kidding me, Phil? And this horse narrative, Uncle Phil died right before that 2014 Super Bowl that was all linked up to Neptune and horses. So, just craziness. But, just trying to see here. Rick and Morty. Rick and Morty is 173, like South Africa, and 225, like the horse. Like horse that happened on 225. All these things with 225. That episode actually. Oh, let's see here. The final episode of this new season of Rick and Morty, which I've never watched the show before, but it came to an end on 9/5, which once again reminds me of 2020 when the Kentucky Derby was moved to 9/5, which is Freddie Mercury's birthday. And remember, Queen was important to that because Donald Trump came out to the Queen song, We Are the Champions, that is a song that everybody has the Mandela effect with. And he did that on Nelson Mandela's birthday in Cleveland, right? But if you go from that date to the synchronicity is also 173 days. And Mandela effect equals 95. Nelson Mandela supposedly died at age 95. And a whole lot more. Pointed out if you go from the day Medina Spirit died to 225 when this happened, it's 2 months and 18 days. And, the reason why is because, look, there's a ghost and a horse, right? Medina Spirit died, on Futurama. If you go from Nelson Mandela's birthday to that day, it was 222 days. Nelson Mandela, 222. Futurama's 229, like France. It's also interesting too. My Facebook or my YouTube thing, my picture is of Bender on Futurama. It's a Halloween costume I made one year, and it's just interesting because Bender equals that equals 95. My name equals 95. You know, my full name equals 95. I grew up as a huge Los Angeles Lakers fan that equals 95, and the Atlanta Braves were my favorite baseball team as a kid. They're all about 95. It's like, it's just mind blowing. But the reason that's important is because this whole thing about horses and whatever was in this Futurama episode. Bender was fighting for like robot and human marriage, and he's like, he mentions how you can be a ghost and a horse and get married, but you can't be a robot and a horse or whatever, right? Or you can't be a robot and a human, but you can be a ghost and a horse. And so it had to do with Bender, which is interesting because Bender is like my avatar on YouTube, you know. And I didn't even realize it equaled 95 until that day, so. And horse also equals 29, which makes me think of Trump and the stock market crash and the number 29 and a whole lot more, so. Let's see. This doesn't necessarily apply, but I had synchronicity yesterday with husky dogs. I don't know why. I I went to Subway. I found a coupon code where you get buy one, get one free. I was like, man, Subway sounds good. And then Jasmine's brother who lives with us, he's like, yeah, I want Subway too. So we ordered a bunch of Subway sandwiches and I drove up to Denison to get them. And I pulled into the parking lot and I noticed the car next to me had a husky in it in the front seat. And the window was kind of down. And I was like, I don't know why. I remember thinking, I'm going to pet this dog. And then he kind of like looked at me weird. And then I was like, maybe I better not. Just because I don't know the dog. Who knows? And whatever. It looked like a nice dog though. And he kind of had his head out the window and so on. But didn't think anything of it. You know, I was just like, I don't know, husky. Went in and got my sandwiches. I got back in the car and I started driving a little bit, I think. And I went to Facebook and literally the second thing that was on Facebook was about, they had a picture of these huskies on there, right? And I'm just like, what are the odds? Because I didn't even have my phone out. My phone no way could have saw that husky dog was next to me. I was just thinking about it, you know? And this is what I'm talking about when we're talking about mind control and all kinds of other things, you know? It's like, what is going on in the world? Like, is it some type of subconscious thing? Is it like AI? I mean, there's something deeper than just the Jesuits did everything, you know? And I mean, I'm not saying that I disagree with there's a cabal and so on, but I mean, this happens all of the time. And it's like, do you really have any choice? Do we live in some type of, you know, AI world? You know, I mean, there's a lot to think about, but it's not the first time this happened. It's happened millions of times to me, you know, just thinking about something and it shows up on Facebook. But, you know, it was about Huskies. And so I came home. I've been trying to watch, I can't think of what the movie is called. The movie Ladybugs. And I was also like, since Logan Paul, I had that sync with Logan Paul, I was trying to watch the movie called The Thinning 2. And it took me forever. I finally found it. I watched part of it earlier, but it took me forever. The old website I used to use as to get free movies, it's like one letter different now, so I couldn't figure out how to find the movies and watch them for free. And I was trying to eat my subs and I was trying to watch a movie and I was just like, I don't know. And then I tried finding the movie Ladybugs because we've been talking about it at work a lot lately. Like I work with a bunch of women and one of them broke a nail and I was like, get those nail breakers. If you ever watched the movie. And they had no idea what I was talking about. But Rodney Dangerfield, I love Rodney Dangerfield. I always thought he was hilarious. But moral of the story, I couldn't find either one of the movies. So I went to Disney Plus thinking that Ladybugs might be on there. And one of the things they suggested was the movie with Huskies with Paul Walker, you know, and it's called 8 Below, where he leaves the 8 Huskies or whatever in the Antarctica, and then he comes back to get them later on and so on. It's just like, I was like, maybe I'll just watch that movie, and maybe I'm supposed to watch that movie, you know, and the only thing that stuck out to me in that movie was that there's 8, well, I don't want to give it away, so if you've never watched this old movie, don't listen for like a few seconds, but I'll give you like a second here. But anyway, there's 8 dogs and only 6 of them live. And I've been talking a lot about August 6th and 8/6. That's the only thing that really stood out to me outside of it having Paul Walker in it. And I wish I could find my old notes back from 2013 because I didn't have a blog and I didn't save things and I wrote everything down on a piece of paper. But I remember Paul Walker was somehow related to that Phil narrative because right after Paul Walker died, we got Phil from Duck Dynasty in the news about hating gay people. Then Uncle Phil died, and then Philip Seymour Hoffman died during the pregame of the Super Bowl where Philip Phillips was singing a song and so on, right? So, I don't know, I just can't remember why Paul Walker was related to that narrative, but he was related to that narrative somehow. And for the life of me, I don't have all them notes anymore. But maybe someday, maybe it'll come back to me for whatever reason. Maybe he was in something. I just can't remember why he was important to that. But it's the only thing I can think of. And anyway, so as I start watching this movie, right? I mean, I'm like, what, 15 minutes into the movie? And my daughter comes over to me and she's like, I got to show you something. And she always watches this Minecraft thing, like AFMAO or something. I'm really not into it at all, but she always wants to tell me about it. So I'm listening, but she's like, I got to show you this part. There's this husky on here. And I'm like, Claire, are you kidding me? You're going to show me about a part with a husky? And I was like, you should look what I'm watching. And I showed her this movie with the huskies on it. And, you know, who knows? But just what are the odds? Her videos about a husky. And I don't know. I don't know what to think. So I don't understand the synchronicity, but eventually I know it'll come back up and it'll make a lot more sense of why I'm supposed to see that. But hopefully the whole boxing thing made sense. I'm going to leave the video there. I've been trying to make this video for hours, but I keep having to stop. But it's all good. Have a good one. Peace.